Actually, it was a funny story why I got called Dr. Unity. I was working for a company called MySpace at the time, and I worked on the MySpace music player. So I actually, if you listen to music, you're welcome. So with that, my boss was actually Tom. We reported directly to him, our division. We worked in research and development. Research and development, if you didn't know, was actually here in Atlanta, Georgia, even though the headquarters was in California. So whenever Tom got a wild idea in his head, he would contact us and we would go ahead and manufacture and build it. One of the things was he heard about this company called Facebook. He said, it's probably not going to go anywhere, but just to be on the safe side, we should probably start making some games. I was like, good, I've been building games for years. That would be wonderful for me. And he's like, okay, let's use Flash. And I go, no, I hate Flash. I don't like Flash. I've been using Flash. I built the music player in Flash. We need to get away from Flash. And he's like, what else is there? I said, let me look around. So looking around, I found something called Unity. And it was, at the time, it was only on a Mac. And I'm like, well, I know of a Mac. I just don't know how to use a Mac. So they were going to buy me a Mac, and they were going to buy me the license, because at the time you had to spend $140 for the license for Unity. Well, then Facebook became Facebook. They released their API, and we all know the story of what happened then. So I saw this engine, Unity, and I got a hold of a Mac from a friend, and I played, and I go, this is what I've been looking for, like, forever. Now, I've been building games since '86, so when MySpace was around, we're talking around 2000s, and, well, I guess 2005, I'm like, it's the first engine that had everything I ever needed. I had to use, a modeling application over here, and a level design program over here, and an audio program over here, and Unity, by its name, put everything together. I'm like, where have you been my entire life? Now, I've used Unreal, but Unreal, at the time, a license for Unreal was $250,000. Couldn't really afford that, especially when you were a student. I guess you all know how that feels. Anyway, so Unity actually had the ability to actually export out to different platforms. And I'm like, wait a minute. So I can write something once, and export it out to all these different platforms, iOS, Android, PC, Mac, Linux. Well, not Linux at the time. I was like, this is amazing. So I went ahead and bought the license for $140. I bought a Mac. Still haven't figured out how to use it yet, but it's not bad. And I actually found out I started my account on Unity in 2009. I was actually talking to Unity just recently, and it's like, you've been on Unity for 11 years and 3 months and 11 days. I'm like, that's a long time. Why don't you give me anything? But anyway, so I was noticing when I was preparing for this right here that, so if you know what Who is when I actually register a domain name. And one of the things about this right here, I was actually at a guy named Andrew Greenberg's house. If you're familiar with Andrew Greenberg, he's a guy who's playing with the camera right now. Anyway, I was working on one of his projects, and he's like, James, you know a lot about this engine. I was like, I've fallen in love with it. It's absolutely great. I mean, I literally cannot stop. That's why I have these bags underneath my eyes, okay? It's like possessed me. It's like my drug. And he's like, he would ask me questions, and I'd just be able to spit things out. He's like, you should be like Unity Doctor. So I said, wait a minute. I typed in Unity Doctor, and it was a marriage counseling service. I was like, I get it. And he's like, how about Dr. Unity? I was like, yeah. So Dr. Unity was registered when I was in Andrew's house, January 28th, 2010. So I've been using it for a very, very, very long time. And I actually used to do training at the US Gaming Arena in Alpharetta, where I would basically show people, I said, stop using Flash, it's evil, and use Unity. So I still use Unity literally every single day. And it's taken over my life. My kids are learning Unity. They're 6, 7, and 30. But anyway, it's one of those, I was like, this is really great. It's one engine that I actually truly, truly love. Okay, Unreal, I'm glad they finally got rid of the 250,000, and now you can export to different platforms, and I use Unreal. Nothing wrong with Unreal, but I've just always fallen in love with Unity because I was able to get a grasp on it earlier. So one of the things I wanted to talk about before I actually get into some complications is one of the things, especially with engineers, there's a problem talking to artists. There's a communication barrier. There's actually a position called a technical artist. Okay, who does the translation? When I was at MySpace, I asked the artist, I says, I need a texture for a ground texture. We're actually making MySpace Invaders where you get to shoot Tom going across the top. It was great. And I asked the artist, I says, I need a texture. He's like, how big is it? I says, we'll just make a power of 2. He's like, okay. So he gives it to me at 150 tall by 2,000 wide. I go, no, a power of 2. He's like, yeah, you can divide it by 2. I go, no, that's not how the power of 2 works. And I found out that there is a problem with engineers who have years of experience trying to bring their dialogue down, that they just assume so much. And when you talk to an artist, they don't have that. Same thing with the artist. They know about brushes and layers and RGB and hex codes and Pantone codes, and engineers going, what's a Pantone code? Okay, I mean, they're just two different worlds, but yet they have to work together in order to make an application. Otherwise, we don't have all these wonderful games. We don't have computers that can do all this. I mean, it takes both of them to work together. So I got into 3D modeling. I do modeling, animation, sound design, programming, level design, lighting, texturing, all because I couldn't wait on other people. It just became an addiction to me. And I decided to teach myself modeling. And I started off in 3ds Max. Well, 3D Studios Release 4. It was on 3 floppy disk. And it's just one of those, I love creating. And over the course of years, different companies bought it out. So what I'm going to show you is using 3D Maya. You can use Blender. There's nothing wrong with Blender. Just I've been driving a Porsche for so long, it's hard to go down to a Yugo. But there's nothing wrong with Blender. I mean, it's a free application, and people are making some really incredible things for it. But the good news is, a long time ago, we used to use a format called DirectX, and that was the universal format. Now we're all using Filmbox, which is called FBX. So we build all our models in a modeling application, Blender or whatever. We export as FBX, and we bring those models into Unity. So that's what I'm going to try and show over here. Unity has also an asset store, which you can purchase many variety of different assets, and they're relatively inexpensive. There's TurboSquid, which is extremely expensive, but they do have good models. And then there's other places you can actually look at the developers or the artists who built these modeling packs, go to their websites, and download their packages. And one of my favorite ones is called BitGem. So I'm doing a shout out to BitGem here. He makes really good pixel art, and I love that hand-painted texture look. Then there's Mixamo, which was now purchased by Adobe. Mixamo allows you to take a 3D character model for free, bring it into the system, and it will automatically rig it, okay, which means it will put a skeletal structure automatically in your biped model. And then you can choose animations they already have and then export that as an FBX. So you can go buy a static 3D model in a T-pose, throw it into Mixamo, grab 30 animations, download it, and now you have a character that's all ready to go in your game, okay, for free. That's the good part. So also, anyone here basically is a student at some point-ish? Okay. You can also download from Autodesk any version of their software. If you go to students.autodesk.com, you can download Maya and Max and everything for free. So I would highly recommend you take advantage of that. You do have to use your .edu account, but otherwise it's for free. Okay, so I was going to go ahead and start showing how to basically have something in Maya and then export it into Unity, Unreal. Does anyone have any questions before I actually get started? Yay, nay. You'll have questions after, I know. Okay. So get ready for my set. So yes, I thank Andrew Greenberg for coming up with the name Dr. Unity. Okay, so we're going to go to Maya here. With my Maya up and running, one of the things that is always important to understand is scale. As engineers and artists, we should always have a point of reference for how big something needs to be, okay? In Unity, when I go to Game Object, 3D Object, and make a cube, okay, it's going to put in position. I'm going to go ahead and click here, reset. I'm going to hit F. That right there, the default Unity method for units is 1 meter. So when you see a 1 by 1 by 1, which is the scale over here, 1 by 1 by 1, that's actually 1 meter, okay? So when you do all your calculations for your physics and your velocity and putting things inside the Unity engine, understand one unit, you're going to move something, you're going to move it more or less one unit. So when inside Maya, if I was going to go ahead and go to create, polygon, cube, I have my cube here, and I go to File, send to Unity. I'm going to say set Unity project. You only need to do it once. So I'm going to set this. I'm going to say where I'm going to have this to. I think it's on my desktop. And I'm going to choose my asset and put it there. I went too deep. Set Unity project. There we go. So now when I go to File, send to Unity, all. That's going to take that cube and it's going to export it. We're going to call this cube-1. Okay? So I'm going to say export all. If I click on Unity, so I can have both applications open up at the same time. Okay? If I look over in my assets, I will see a, did I pick the wrong one? Hold on a second. If you need to, you can right-click, say Show in Explorer, and it'll show you actually where your export is at. Oh, desktop terrain, that's why silly. File, set Unity, we're going to say desktop terrain. File, send to Unity, all. We're going to call this cube-1, export all. So you've downloaded Maya, you've installed it, you've created a cube, okay? You come click over on Unity, that's going to, there it is right there. So let's go ahead and change this to default.
Hey James, would you die if you knocked down the resolution so folks can see the words?
Would I die? No, I wouldn't die. It would be inconvenient, but I like you, so we'll do that.
For you in the chat who've complained about not being able to see anything that's actually on the screen other than the cube, we'll make it a little larger here. Or else I'll just go ahead and zoom on it and ignore James completely.
Hold on, yeah, 16 by 9. Can they see that?
We'll find out.
Okay. Ooh, my. Okay. So anyway, I have my cube here, I think. So anyway, I have my cube, and I'm going to focus in on that. Now I'm going to grab my cube 1 and drag it into the scene. Wait, where's my cube? I know it's there. I just put it there. I can go over here and say reset, and I see. Wait a minute, isn't that it right there? It's really tiny. So what happened was, by default, Maya actually has everything built in centimeters. Okay? When you install it, it by default always puts centimeters. Okay? So it's like, oh, okay, well that's silly. So you go to Windows, you go to Settings and Preferences, you click on Settings, and you'll see linear centimeters. We're going to choose meters. Now, before I do that, how many centimeters, we have engineers here, how many centimeters are in a meter? I heard 7, and I heard 100. We're going to go with 100. So, when you bring something in as an FBX format, okay, and it automatically does that with that Unity plugin that I showed you how you set the project and you export. What you can do is you can, in the inspector, you'll see you have model, rig, animation, and materials. The scale factor is 1, because that's 1 centimeter. So if I make this, 100, and I come down and I click apply, boop, it's the exact same size. Okay? Now, it will get very tedious having to every time export something and then type the scale factor in of 100. So what you can do is inside your modeling application, you want to make sure you understand this up front before you have your artist, whenever you find an artist who is willing to really do work, change all this stuff. So you go to Windows, Settings, Preferences, click on Settings. We're going to change this to meters, okay? And I'm going to click Save. Now, even though you saw, if you didn't, the grid actually got bigger, but the cube did not, okay? So if I were to go to Create, Polygon, and a Cube, I had this monster cube all of a sudden. So when you change the settings, it doesn't automatically scale everything in your scene, which is why it's important to have everything set up first, okay? I can show that to you by, that's the little cube right there. Look how pretty it is. Delete. Okay. So we want to delete that cube, and we're going to put this back at 0, 0, 0. Okay, so now if I export my cube, send to Unity all, and we'll just call this one, in this case, cube-2. I hit export all. Come over to my Unity. I have a cube 2. If I drag and drop it, and then reset the positions, I'll just zero it out. And I move it over. Now we're good. I'm telling you all that because what you can do is you can actually create the entire level. You can create this wonderful, beautiful looking City Hall building in Maya. There's probably architectural drawings for this building where you can download or whatever, and you can convert it from DFX or whatever format it is into FBX, and you can have this actual representation, okay? So you have all that there. And when you bring it in here, by default, you got your, the way Unity works is everything has to relate to what's called a game object, okay? Everything over here in the hierarchy is a game object. Think of a game object as an empty container, okay, like a glass, a clear glass, okay? And what you do with that clear glass is you put components in. So everything that's inside the inspector over here of the thing that I selected on, in this case cube 2, is a component. The transforms are a component. This P2 mesh filter is a component. Mesh render is a component. All these things right here are components, and that's what makes up your actual game, okay? Every game object, even if it's an empty piece of glass, will have a position. If I right-click here and I say create an empty, it will always have a transform. That's how everything works, okay? And then you can parent-child relationship to this. So if I create this game object right here, which is 0, 0, 0, in the world space, and I take my cube 2 and I put it into game object, okay? The pivot point for my game object, which is my parent, is right here. So if I move this up, it moves that. And if I rotate this, it makes that almost like a little planetarium. Okay? So it's not very difficult to bring things in from your modeling package as long as you use the FBX format. You can also click File. You have it selected. You go File, Export Selection, and you go through this small nightmare. Then you have all this, and you'll say FBX Export, and then you can navigate here, go back to here. Wait, I said terrain, my bad. Terrain, and I can type in cube-3. Okay, and it will also create a cube if I selected the right directory. May put it in the other directory. Maybe I wasn't too far in. Export selection. Oh, yeah, there it is. So I'm going to drag that and put it right there. Yay. Come over here. There's my cube 3. Once again, it's the same thing. That tool that they have for exporting is just an easier way to do that instead of having to keep selecting that. Also with Maya, you may not have the FBX exporter automatically on by default. Then you have to go turn that on. So it's just easier to use the file and then set your Unity project up. Okay, now there is a small caveat when you have models. I mentioned the company BitGem. Please don't be anything bad. Please. What? They have a lot of, I like medieval fantasy. It's a thing of mine. So like this model set is $14, and you can get all these different parts for it. And the way he usually builds it is they're snappable and they're modular, so you can actually put it all together. Another place to get things from is the Unity Asset Store, which you can go to assetstore.unity3d.com. and you can type in, as soon as it goes in, you can type in characters, and look, a little baby. Grab this little baby, and you can purchase this. They have other tools that you can do this, where you can figure out, hey, I don't want to pay any money, I'm a student, so how do I get something cheaper? That's not where I want to be. So
Hey, James, also show them how to analyze the animations and the size of this, especially since they're doing mobile apps.
Say that a different way?
How big are the models? Show them how to analyze the size of the models, make sure they understand how big they can go, and also how to look at the animations and what to look for.
Right. So let's see. We got this. We'll use this guy. Okay, we have an elf character. Let me see if he has animations. I've spent an enormous amount of money on the Unity Asset Store. Sometimes there's always sales, and I buy things, and I buy them and don't even look at them. Bad habit, don't do that. But one of the things I always look for, as I've learned over the course of years, what to actually look for when I look at models. So like when I look at something here, I will always look at the latest release date, and I see this here hasn't been updated in almost 2 years. Which versions it support, and I will also check the releases, and I'll find out if they've ever been maintaining it. So that's one of the first things I've looked for, whether it's a plugin or a package or whatever, because if a developer who puts something on the Asset Store puts it out, have you guys ever written code where it's bug-free? That's right, okay? So if they put out a release and it hasn't been touched in a year, more than likely, they just put it out to try to, help somebody, but there's probably bugs in it, and obviously they're not supporting it. So it's one of the things I always look for. I always look at the package contents. I personally don't like buying things that have a DLL inside there. I want source code, because more than likely, if the developer stops developing for it and I have a product out on my, I built something, I need to be able to maintain it, and that person could be, they just lost interest in it or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that, but I need to be able to fix it. So I want to make sure that it has source code. In this case, I am looking at materials here. I see a mat, I see a mesh, I see there's a prefab here. We got some textures. So I'm not seeing anything off the top of my head that shows me that this has animation. Usually they do say somewhere in the list it has see, it just talks about the albedo, metallic. See, this character does not have animation. So let's find something that does have animation. There we go. The cyborg character always comes with textures and 20 animations. So I'm going to say add to my assets. I'm going to say open in Unity, open my Unity editor. I'm going to download. I'm going to click import. I like to make sure that they're not putting anything in weird locations like editors or anything like that. Models belong in models folder, so I'm okay with this. They have a scene. We're going to click import. When you're dealing with iOS and Android devices, you're very, very limited on the amount of memory you have. Programmers have been fighting this since the birth of the computer. You have around 1 gigabyte of RAM, and the operating system's taking up about a third of that. You want to make sure that your application, if you have texture maps, you want to make sure your 4K texture maps are reduced down to at least 2048 or smaller. We can actually do that by, I did just import the cyborg, right? Yeah. So I'm going to go model, cyborg. Whoa, he's huge. Okay. Let me spin him around. Okay, so one of the first things I like to do is I like to go to the game view, and there's something called stats. I turn on stats, and that tells me about what my camera is seeing here, okay? So with this animation, I'm in game view, of course. I'm going to click play. Okay, he's not doing anything, and I do see there's a controller with no runtime controller attached to it, so this probably, he doesn't have it set up. Okay, fine. They did say they had animations in here, right? That is true. So what I will do is I will quickly right-click here, go to Create, Animation Controller, double-click on Animation Controller, go to my animations. We want names here. How about idle? We'll put idle there. So now I have animation controller. I'll click on Cyborg. Go back to my assets, grab this new animation controller, put it there. Go to my scene view, hit play. Let's see if that worked. Otherwise, there's one other thing you gotta look at. Oh, look, he's idling. Okay? If he's not idling, one of the things you want to look for is you click on the model itself. I'm going to select this. And you have 4 options. You have model, rig, animations, and materials. So model, we already know the scale factor is 1. If we wanted him to get down to our cube size, what do you think we would want to do? Type in 0.01. Hit apply. Look, he's really tiny. Okay, let's just make the Y there. So he's roughly the same size of our cubes. So I was going to take this cube, move it over here. Oh, this is cool. I did not know this for the longest time, and this has saved my life in so many different times. So there's actually a little gizmo on here, okay? So obviously you guys have done this, and you've done this, and you've moved this right here. But if you move your mouse onto this little plane, you can click and hold with your left mouse button and move along those 2 axes, so it doesn't automatically move things around. Sometimes when you try to, you grab it and you're pulling it around, it's like, oh, I didn't want to go that direction. You can go, like this one's going to go that direction, whatever way that pane is facing. But that was nice to learn that, especially when you're designing landscapes and you have to move buildings, and you try to move a building, all of a sudden it goes down through the floor, like, oh, I didn't want to do that. So that was really nice. So yes, he's roughly 1. So now I'm going to go to hit play. I'm going to my game view, and I'm going to see my frame rate is currently running at whatever, 700, okay? If you don't know, frame rate, even though it's saying it's 700, it can only go as fast as the monitor. So if your monitor is a 60 hertz monitor or a 90 hertz monitor or 120 hertz monitor, the fastest your frame rate can go is of your hardware, okay? What it's showing me is it's calculating if there was an unlimited monitor that it would do 700 frames per second, which is insane, okay? So the other thing I'm looking for is the number of tries, okay, which is this case 36.8, and the number of vertices is 43.8. I mainly look at tries. I want to make sure that I have a value that I think is good for my mobile device, which is for me around 250,000. What?
Tries is short for triangles.
Triangles. Yes, yes, that's true. Okay, and a lot of times on mobile devices, you want to make sure it's very finicky when it works with lighting. So right now I have a light, okay, and it says batch is 25, but if I turn off the directional light here, okay, look at my batches, it drops down to 8, okay, because the way the light has to hit the normal on a triangle, it has to calculate that and actually display that. All that's happening in fractions of a second, okay, to actually get 1 frame to be rendered. So in this case, I turn off the light, which is really nice, but you can't see anything. But the frame rate is even going faster. So I'm going to turn the light back on. Now I got 25 batches. So you want to manipulate your lights a little bit. You might want to use certain mobile shaders that actually help with how lights determine on there. But the main thing you want to look at is the number of tries. For mobile devices, I've always felt more comfortable around 250,000 or less. The new iPhones 11, for example, can do more. But I guarantee you, no matter what your client is, they're all going to want to say, we want to work on an iPhone 2 or iPhone 3GS. And I was like, no, you have to be able to tell the client it can't work on all devices. I mean, Apple puts out a new device roughly every year. The way a lot of the companies I work with, I make them be 2 generations behind. I said, that's it. I won't support anything more than 2 generations behind. So we got 11 now. So anything 9, 10, and 11 I'll support, okay? And 9 is iffy. But don't let them tell you to go like the 6. There's no reason for that. Let's go back to the character. So I imported this character, and I click on select. So this is my cyborg base. Materials. This is another problem that a lot of people didn't realize this. So we have our base app. Wait, no. Here we go, body. So I downloaded, as you saw from the asset store, the FBX model. If I were to go to my cube, okay, and I look at my materials, and I had attached a material, it would be set for read-only. Why? Because it embeds it into the FBX file. They don't want you to mess with it. So you would have to export that. So if I went to, I need some picture. Pictures. Name a game. Mario what? There we go. We're going to steal something from Mario Kart. We're actually going to liberate it. Okay, so I'm going to drop it on my desktop. What was that? Save image as. I don't know what a GIF-if? Really? Am I just... Okay, how about Mario Kart PNG? Oh, look, this works. Obviously, somebody hates me right now, but that's fine. We'll do this. We'll see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen. We'll find out. So back in my modeling application here, I'm going to right-click here. I'm going to go assign new material, and I'm going to assign it a Lambert. Over here in my Lambert, I'm going to choose color, and I'm going to choose file, as soon as I figure where file is on this resolution. Click there, go to my desktop. Actually, Andrew created this one. Why is...
Try clicking on it, and then try from there.
Yay! Give that guy a banana. Okay. Let me get back to my Maya. So let's go back. There we go, Mario Kart. Okay, so I have now put Mario Kart on here. Okay? Now, it's a cube, and I haven't UV'd it, but I have Mario Kart on here. I can go to UV, I can go to automatic. Oops, I didn't have it selected.
Somebody say banana.
Okay, so now I have a cube, okay? It's good because it's actually transparent, which is one of the things I wanted to show. So I'm going to send to Unity all. We're going to call this, you guessed it, Cube 4. And I go over to Unity, and I see my Cube 4, and I drag it in there. It's like, wait, you saw me put the material on it. You know it's there. And in fact, if I click Select, and I click on Extract Textures, it's like, wait a minute, something happened here. That doesn't make sense. You have to actually export your materials in order to see them, okay? Because it, like I said, it makes it read only. So let me confirm something. I did do that. File, send to Unity. I did do all. Embed media. Oops. Click that. Okay, now I should have, there we go, extract textures. I click extract textures. I'm going to go ahead and create a folder. Materials. I select folder. Look, now I have the cube. Okay, and look, it even has transparency. Now if I wanted to change the albedo color or something like that, if I go over here and click on my standard shader, wait a minute, why is it read only? That's what I was just talking about. Now you also need to export that, extract materials. Oh, look, same directory. Okay, now I can click on here, and now I have the ability to click the albedo and change the albedo color. So as you saw, there's two ways of doing something. I created something in a 3D modeling application, and I was unable to touch the textures because it set it for read-only. Also, I downloaded something from the asset store, which worked fine. So if you're having trouble when you get your assets, don't fret. It's probably one of those two that you just need to export the textures and the materials. Okay. Now, the other thing I wanted to try and show was terrain. You have a tangerine. Okay. So one of the things that I thought was amazing in Unity is I always had to use 3D World Creator, which was a third-party tool that actually created some wonderful terrains. Another one was called Bryce, way back in the days. And it basically created these wonderful, magnificent terrains. And then I would have to bring it into the system. Now, one of my first published games was called Invasion: The Last Stand. And I used a company called Wild Tangent. And essentially, they gave you an SDK, and you had to build everything from scratch. So, in my game, you had a hover tank, and it was stationary. If you ever played the game Beachhead, same concept, except in space. So, it was stationary, you spun around, alien ships came at you, and you shot them, and then sometimes things would fall out. You shoot that to get more ammo. It was great. And then my producer said, "This is great, but do me a favor." I said, "Sure." She's like, "Make it move." I had designed all the algorithms, all the AI, to center in on the world, in the 0, 0, 0 coordinates of the world. And all of a sudden, they changed it to have anything move around. So now I have to make a dynamic hover tank, and obviously it's really easy to go out of the world. So I had to make the walls taller, and I had to place trees. And I literally had to place trees. So what I would do is I had my little hover tank, I'd drive it around and go, this is a good spot for a tree. And I had the X, Y, Z coordinate out there, the position, and I'd write it down on a piece of paper. Shut down the application, go into an INI file, type it in, fire it back up, and say, oh yeah, the tree looks like it's right there. Okay? I do that for trees. That's insane. Okay? So when Unity came around, and after going through that nightmare to keep this hover tank contained, they have the ability to go to terrain and a terrain toolbox. With the terrain toolbox, it's going to give you a landscape. In this case, it's 500 by 500 by 500. Now think of it as, when you say 500 height, it has to do with like a cube, okay? Not that you can go up to 500. And I'm just going to click Create, okay? So it has created it. I'm going to attempt to dock this, but I don't have a whole lot of resolution to play with right now. Okay, so there's my terrain. Now, this is another gotcha moment in Unity. Okay, I have created a terrain. And as going back with the hover tank, I want to make sure, I says, okay, and then I can go into over here, go to my inspector, click on my tool selected, hit come here. Instead of paint texture, I'm going to go to raise and lower terrain. Here's all my brushes. I says, okay, I got this. This makes sense. And, well, that would probably be where I'm going to draw this at. So then you start going like that. It's like, oh, that's fun. Okay? I'm like, that is fun. And I can make this bigger. And I look down here. I was like, brush strength. Okay? And I was like, let's move that down here. So if I hold this down, I'm not drawing as much. And if I move the brush strength over here, it goes insane. So it basically has to do with how much are you influencing those vertices of the terrain. Okay? Now, I'm showing you all this for a reason. One of the things that, once again, my wonderful producer, she's like, hey, this is really great, but make some lakes. What? Make the ground go inside and put water so they can't go in the water. Remember, Unity didn't exist. So I'm like, okay. So I had to figure out how to bring the terrain up. Well, remember, I just created a terrain at 0, 0, 0. I can't go down, okay? So one of the things I like to do here is I would go to raise or lower terrain, and I can actually specify the set height, okay? And left click to set the height, okay? What I would normally do is go to raise or lower height, and I'd pick a height that I want to be at, and I would set the elevation to that. And therefore, I can start making my little valleys. So with this, there's around, I actually made a cheat sheet for everyone. So it's one of those, I've done it so long, and it's hard to explain. So in this case, I'm holding down Control, and Control allows you to do the opposite version. So if you just hit with your left mouse button, it will go up. If I hold down Control, it will go down. Okay? So I'm going to put all that down. So let's go ahead and pick a different brush. Oh, that looks kind of cool. I can also hold down R and rotate it. I can rotate my brush. I was like, this actually looks kind of cool. But there's something about it that just doesn't feel natural, okay? At the hover tank game, what I had to basically do was paint, pick terrain, and go around the edge. Oops. Let's bring my strength down a little bit. I had to make like you were in a bowl. Okay, because we didn't want you to see out, and we wanted the terrain tall enough that the hover tank wouldn't go up. Okay, it's like, okay. But there's something kind of unnatural about the middle. Okay, it's just too flat. Now, I've been to Illinois. I know it's pretty flat. It's really, really flat. I can't find, I mean, I lived here for 22 years. I have yet to find anything flat in Georgia, okay? Which is great. And because it's always interesting when you drive. So one of the things you want to do is you want to do something called noise. So what noise allows you to do is you click over here, you go to sculpt, and you do noise. And then when you do that, it gives you little indentions. It's just enough to break things up. Okay? So it doesn't look like, Illinois. And corn. Okay? It's like, that's starting to look okay. It's not too terribly bad. But, it's checkerboard. I haven't been to any worlds yet that are checkerboarded. How would we want to add terrain? How do we want to add color? So we go to our paint detail. And on the paint detail, we're going to click Edit Detail, and we're going to add a grass texture. In this case, I have already downloaded a plugin. It's a free one, Fantasy Forest Environment Free Demo, and I've already got this. And it's going to come with trees and grass, which is one of the things we want to talk about. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to choose grass. I should just double click on it. Click Add. Now, I'm actually drawing grass. Okay? So if I increase my brush size, I could draw a whole lot of grass. Okay? Now, as I zoom away, it will disappear. Why does it disappear? Because you're drawing blades of grass. So your computer has to calculate all that. By default, they have it with like a field of view, a depth, and you can adjust over here in one of these settings. So you can say see from far away. But what I want to do here is I want to go to my brush, choose a softer brush, change my brush size to something smaller, and holding down Control, I can now draw a path through it. Let's get back to painting, because that was one I want to show you. So paint texture. So with paint texture, we're going to go down here, and just like in Photoshop, we have layers. So I'm going to click add a layer, and I'm going to choose the first layer that you ever choose covers your entire terrain. So what do you want to see first? Which layer you want for the base texture? Someone say something. Dirt. Really? Okay. So I chose dirt, because that's what someone told me, and that's what it looks like. It's like, well, that's not too terribly bad, okay? And it's a material, so if you really need to, you can also change the tiling settings. I can change it to 1 by 1, and it's like, that looks yucky, okay? I can change it to 50 by 50, and tiling is just what it sounds like. It's how many times you can actually put something in a specific space, okay? The higher the number, the more tiling is, the better it looks, but at the same time, it can look like it's going to be repetitive. So you got to break it up. How do we break things up? We use trees. So edit tree, add a tree, click over here, choose me a tree. That's not, where's the tree? Oh, look, there's a tree. So I'm going to, now I'm drawing trees. Okay? So now you see I have created a terrain. Never do this, by the way. I'm going to increase the intensity of my light. I'm washing it out so they can see it. Okay? I don't know is that better for you guys on the projector? Which one? That one or that one?
Both look good in real
Okay, so anyway, now I can take my wonderful cyborg that I borrowed, who is right here, and I could place him. Where'd he go? Oh, he's way over there. Oh, here's another cool thing you can do. So I'm going to go over my trees. Go on in, and I can actually choose the cyborg, go to game object, you can move the view. So he puts it right there in front of you. Okay, that I use a lot. If I do this right here, so I have a different view, I can move him over there, and I can bring him down, but I'm trying to get him next to those trees. You gotta do sound effects. Let's get out of that view. Oh man, I missed. Where's the cyborg? There we go. He should be really close at 0. Okay, now remember, we scaled him down. So let's go ahead and, well, not that giant. Might be a little big. And there we go. We put our little cyborg here in our terrain. And if I had a controller, I could hook it up and I can actually walk through the terrain that we just built. Okay, so we got questions now? Maybe? One, maybe?
We got a question from YouTube chat.
Okay.
Epic Steve wants to know, how would you make that world round? How would you make that terrain wrap around?
I'll buy a plugin. I'm not being funny. There's a plugin called Round World. I know because I own it. That's true.
It is a flat Earth, Epic Steve.
There is a plugin out there. I'm trying to remember what it's called. But if you want to do 2D, obviously there's this easy round platform. But there is it's World. Yep, there it is. Curved World. Told you. See, I already own it. Yep, open in Unity. So there you go. And it's $35. I mean, that actually, to answer your question, is done with a shader. It just projects that so it looks like it's turning, but that's all it really is. So, I mean, you could use a height map on a cube and actually have it pointing out in different directions if you really wanted to, but I would just cheat and use a shader. Okay? What else? Sure. I built 2. This is also another curved world. There is a kids game that you have to do with like taxis, having to move around. I know that one's out there. The name's escaping me. Usually, what you can do is, in this case, I would go to this person's little planet. Let me go back to the curved world. So curved world, and I would check the publisher. In this case, whoever made it. In this case, there's usually a support on here. You can go to the forum, or you can go to the company, and they usually advertise, hey, it's also using in these other different products. So that's where I normally find my stuff at. For whatever reason, some people don't want to talk about what games they've built, using Unity, because they don't want everyone else to copy them, I guess. But I'm like this. You remember this right here? This is from the tutorial section. In fact, all this is from the tutorial section of Unity. These are all, yeah. Okay. That's it. A room full of people have one question? I am awesome. I am awesome. Yay, Paul, how can I help you?
So let's say an artist or a modeler made a nice detailed city, but obviously they don't know poly counts and all that stuff. What are some, and you try your best to reduce and make it as more fittable into your project. What are some other techniques that you can do to make these more detailed objects come into your game without having to modify it too much in like Maya, or 3ds Max, Blender, etc.?
Okay, so the question is essentially an artist has got into ZBrush and they went to town and they created this wonderful, beautiful sculpt of a character, and it's probably around 1.8 million polys. Okay, it's a little poly heavy. And we want to reduce that. There are multiple tools out there. TopoGun is one of them. ZBrush has a new decimate tool to allow you to reduce the polygon count. There is Simple Polygon, which is another plugin that you can get, which I think Microsoft now owns. And there's InstaLOD, which actually is a tool that allows you to reduce the number of polygons. Obviously, one of the things you want to do is get the polygon count low and then use materials and normal maps to give you the illusion of a 3D, like if I'm wearing a bandolier or something like that from Star Wars Chewbacca, okay, that may not be modeled. That may be a texture that has the depth channels that makes it look like it appears that it has three-dimensional depth. So there's a lot of tools you want to do like that. But the big ones are InstaLOD, SimpleGun, TopoGun, and there's another one. Well, I know ZBrush inside of it has a decimate tool, but the term you're looking for is decimation.
So let's build on that and talk a little bit more about LODs,
Okay.
and especially since they're doing GIS, maybe how to implement multiple LODs in a game. LODs are levels of detail, so when you're really zoomed down low looking at something very close, you'll see a lot of detail, but as you zoom out, you lose that detail. You actually get rid of some of that art and show other things so that you can show more things and not slow down your engine.
Right, the concept basically has to do with, let's just say you're playing a game like an MMO, like World of Warcraft or something, or whatever the new MMO is. And obviously you have a texture, and the texture is in your face. Here we go, Skyrim, that's a perfect example. Skyrim has 4K textures, okay? Which means when you're X number of units away, it's going to show a texture that's 4K. It's going to be really pristine and good. And after a specific number of units away, it's actually going to reduce that down to 2048, and then go all through the powers of 2, okay? Until it gets to essentially 1 pixel by 1 pixel. That is actually called MIP mapping, okay? You do that because you don't want to be having all these high-end details that's rendered 300 units away because they're not going to see it, okay? So in Unity, most of these, if I grab a texture, we'll look for the okay, there is a generate MIP maps. So this model, by default, how I brought it in, has generate MIP maps turned on. So if I was in front of the camera and I pulled it away, you will see it is starting to reduce the number of how much is being used, okay? It's kind of like an LOD, but it's usually mainly using the texture. By default, it's usually on. That's good and bad. If you're ever dealing with anything inside of a GUI where you're building a like, let's just say you're building a starship, like you're in a, I don't know, X-Wing or something of that nature. You're in a starship, and you have console applications or console a radar and these buttons to turn on and off. It actually may be at that depth where the MIP mapping comes in, and all of a sudden your texture is like all blurry. It's like, why is that? I would just go in there and change that texture and turn off MIP mapping is one of the things I have to do, because it is kind of set by the system. So. But LOD is really important also for reducing polygon models. So speed tree is also another application. Since I just showed you how to create trees, you don't want to be drawing all these trees infinite number of distance. And the LOD is automatically built into a lot of these. If I go back to the Unity Asset Store and I type, whoops, that's not back here. There we go. And I type in speed tree. Okay, one of the things that you'll see in here, normally, here we go, these 4 speed tree models, seamless LOD. So a lot of packages will automatically have LODs in there. Otherwise, you have to use a third-party tool, or the artist needs to start reducing them down. So there's caveats on using that. So the other thing is you can also have your 3D model turn into what's called a billboard. So you have your 3D geometry. It could be a high-end polygon model, like, I don't know, a tree would be 500, okay? And after X number of units, it basically turns into a 2-polygon model, which is just a plane that has a picture of a tree on it. You can't tell, but it's always facing the person, so that's why it's like, why is that in the distance kind of looking kind of weird? Because it's probably just a plane. Those are optimization techniques. Yes? Grab the mic.
Can you share some lighting tips? A minute ago, you cranked up the brightness.
Yeah, never do that.
Don't ever do this.
Yeah.
So occasionally, I know a lot of us students have trouble making things look pretty. So if you could share maybe even my demo some lighting stuff, that would be awesome.
I can. I don't know about now because I'm not set
Live
up.
demo on lighting
Um,
techniques.
So with lighting, first off, number one, never, ever, ever, ever have your lights. There is no such thing, in my opinion, as an absolute white light. Every light bulb in here has a setting, and it has some kind of yellow or blue or orange into it. There's no white light. Whenever you deal with, I just did the terrain real quick. I would go here, and I always revert. I would change the color. Unity used to always default to straight white. I'd always give it a little bit of a yellow, okay? And depending on the mood and atmosphere of my scene, I always want to fool with that. Some of the things that you need to know about that is whether it's real-time, baked, what's the third one, or mixed. So the concept is when you use baked lighting, you actually have the system build all the lights for all the objects in your scene. And you do that by clicking one of your objects and then choose it to be static. So what that does is static means what? Something's not going to move, right? That's a lie. I guarantee you it's going to move. But anyway, it's going to take that in there in the light consideration, and it's going to make a texture map behind the scenes of what it looks like with that light. So if I did that and I removed that cube, you would still see the shadow of the cube, okay? Because the texture is baked with that lighting on there. The great news about using baked lighting is it makes your computer go super fast, because one of the biggest calculations besides physics inside your gaming engine, in this case Unity, is the calculation of light. Light emits from something, and then it bounces all over the place, okay? So there's a photon coming from that light, hitting here, going up the projector, bouncing. It just goes, and it diminishes over the distance. We would rather the engine not have to calculate that every single frame. We want to fake it and have it baked in there. We would want to leave on mixed for our characters, for example, that we want to cast a shadow. So like if we're building, in this case, a scene with our trees, in theory the trees are not going to move. We have some buildings, we have some fences, we had an overturned cart, okay? I would make all those static, bake the lighting on those, and then have my character as either mixed or real time in order to drop the shadows and give it the illusion that it's still real. Yes, Paul?
Is there a way to adjust your baked lighting to, like, say, you have your tree static all fine, great and well, but you also have this, like, little sway in them. There's some shader or some sort of magic.
SpeedTree has a lot of those features already built in. SpeedTree is something that I've used and not used. A lot of the trees, as I mentioned, I like medieval, and I like...
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. So the question was, with trees, we just talked about how there's a model, and sometimes they'll sway back and forth a little bit, and it gives some kind of atmosphere and life to your trees. Obviously, having that at a distance in a billboard, it's kind of hard to make a billboard kind of tilt and everything. So how do we manipulate that? There are shaders out there that give the illusion of like a ripple effect, so it looks like it's moving. Unity is packed full of shaders, and you can create, I wish I had time, but they also have a shader engine inside Unity now that you can actually plug in all your components and build your own shaders instead of having to go into the actual code and create it. There are a plethora of wind shaders that you would want to use. I can go to the asset store. It says it's like my go-to place where I want to go to. See, wind, tree, shader. World Space Tree. My guess is probably be one of those PBR ones, trunk shaders. the vegetation shaders, and also there's double-sided PBR. One of the quick things about trees is leaves. So as I mentioned with polygons, or tries, when we're talking about tries, we have, it's solid on one side and not solid on the other, and that's how your normal is positioned, and that's how the light reflects off of it. If you flip that over, and I can demonstrate that really quick by going to Game Object, create a plane. So I got my plane right there. Let's just get this up a little higher. So there's my plane. We all see that plane, right? And if I take my plane and I rotate it, and all of a sudden it disappears. Okay? It's still an outline there. It's still there, but the light is no longer affecting the normals that's on those tries. It's only affecting it on this side, so it's one-sided. With leaves, you would want to double-side your textures. Okay? If you think about that, okay, that's good because, sometimes leaves are going to sway and it's going to go over. The problem is that is going to be very process intensive, okay, because it doubles it, okay? So instead of making, if a tree has, 10,000 leaves and you double it, now you have 20,000 tries you have to worry about to calculate light reflecting and bouncing off each one of those. So try to use a shader for most of those.
Hand avatar.
Karen? Hey, Karen. Okay.
Hand avatar will ask your question next.
All right. What are some plugins that you would suggest for like beginners starting out, stuff like that? Like 3 of them, preferably not really expensive ones.
It all depends on which ones you want.
Which ones do you use more often?
Okay, so one of the games I'm creating is called Snarfquest Tales. Snarfquest Tales is a point-and-click adventure game based upon a guy his name is Larry Elmore. He created the art of Dungeons & Dragons. He's a good friend of mine, and I happened to get his license for a comic strip that he created. Larry Elmore is known for the, if you ever seen this art, okay, that's his art. He created the Red Box edition. So he is kind of the godfather of creating art. He also created a comic book strip called Snarfquest, which I've done. One of the things that I bought a motion capture suit, which was phenomenal. It was great. One of the bad things about motion capture suits is it doesn't really work with fingers. Okay, so my first plugin that I would recommend is, if I figure out where I was. I was just there. Final IK, okay? So what that does, it allows me to get the motions I want. I can manipulate my character in the game view to actually reach over, pull his sword out properly, or reach forward and grab a door, okay? Instead of having to do the animation, I can do it in the Unity engine so my hand is actually touching that perfectly, okay? There is a plugin, I'm actually gonna give you 4 because this one has to do with artists. I worked for this company that had a lot of artists and had one programmer, essentially me. And the artists were phenomenal. They were great. They did awesome work, and we were trying to collaborate together inside Unity. I showed them a plugin called Playmaker, and they got it. It's a visual scripting language that allows them to build everything they want, especially for GUI, like squashing and stretching and explosions and particles and everything. And they built all that in Playmaker, and I called that as an event. So the artists were able to create what they saw in their head, and then I just called it to make it happen. It's called Playmaker. So I would say Final IK, which is 90, Playmaker, and that's mainly used for artists. There's nothing wrong with engineers do it, just engineers like the code. Another one that I use a lot of tools to see how big my project is. When you export things to iOS and APK, Android, you have to be very limited on the amount of size that you can make the packages. So there's something called, hang on, I know another one. Advanced Player. There it is. That's my baby right there. So inside Unity, there's something called player prefs. A player prefs allows you to save states to a device, which is phenomenal. So I can say like the high score, for example. So if somebody exits the program, closes on their iOS or Android, brings it back up, it will show you the last high score, which is great. I may want to see those variables every now and then, okay? And there's no really easy way to see it. So with the advanced player prefs, it has a little window that shows you all the player prefs that you set. It's like, oh, that's great, okay? Instead of guessing all the time. Because sometimes you may set one and you change the name and you're like, wait, do I have one set or not? So advanced player prefs. I want to call it vacuum cleaner. Vacuum cleaner, that basically, that's not what I'm looking for, but I look for tools mainly that help me know how big my package is going to be and where my bloat is. Okay? And the last package I would want to talk about is a console for mobile. Okay? Which drawing a blank on. The purpose of it is when you're inside your iOS device, you don't know what's happening. And sometimes you want to see the player log. So you can actually set up this console for mobile or portable console, and you pull 2 fingers down, and you see the player log. You can scroll through it, and you can see all the errors, and I guarantee you'll have null reference exception errors, and it'll show you exactly where those are. It's like, oh, that was my problem. Yeah, those probably be some of my biggest ones. Yeah, device console. You would want to see what's happening on the device. Whether you're exporting for Xbox or PS4 or Switch, you don't know what's happening on that. Okay, and you need to be able to understand, is something scaled wrong? Because sometimes Unity gets stupid and sets the scale to 0, and you're like, why did my thing disappear? It's in the scene, but it just scales to 0, and you can't see anything. So those would be my 4. But Playmaker, getting an artist use Playmaker, that's great. They can do some really amazing stuff in there. And as an engineer, you just call it and be done with it.
Hand Avatar on YouTube wants to know more about Snarfquest and Cutthroat Cavern.
Oh, cool. Okay, so in the last 11 years I've been building games for Unity, I've built around 65 games. It's an addiction for me. So, Snarfquest Tales. I grew up I was a teenager in the 80s. And one of the things I always loved was point-and-click adventure games, like King's Quest, Space Quest, Leisure Suit Larry, Secrets of Monkey Island, Zack McCracken and the Alien Mindbenders, Maniac Mansion. These are the games I grew up on. They were basically single-player puzzle-solving games, and I liked that. I played other games too, but I liked that. I kind of like the wit and humor of that. And in fact, I'm working with David Fox, who's one of the people who created Maniac Mansion, Zack McCracken. He did Indiana Jones for Lucasfilm. Lucas Games. Lucasfilm? Anyway, the LucasArts brand, and when he actually created these games. And it's a Rube Cube game, so it's Rube Goldberg machines, because I like that puzzle aspect of it. So with Snarfquest is a point-and-click adventure game basically built on a character that came out from 83 to 89 in Dragon magazine. And I thought that would be a perfect opportunity to show a point-and-click, because that was the same genre time that I was into the point-and-click adventure games. So Snarfquest Tales is a comic series that was created by Larry Elmore, and it ran in Dragon magazine. And one of the things I always thought about, the point of Snarf, who looks a lot like Jar Jar Binks, doesn't completely act like him, but looks a lot like him, but he came out first. I didn't want to make a game based upon the comic book as like you've already played it. I've always there was a panel where you see basically the king has died, and the first one who can get the most riches in the kingdom is the new leader. So Snarf goes, sounds like a good idea. And then the next panel, you see Snarf with all his armor, his hat on, and his sword, and he's going to go on an adventure to get all this gold. I was like, well, what happened? How did he go from this panel to this panel? Well, Larry was lazy, but I was like, I wanted to put, what happened? How did he go get his armor? He meets his parents, and he goes and gets the helmet out of the rat's nest. The rat hat box, that kind of thing. And then Cutthroat Caverns is a game based upon a company called Smirk and Dagger that was released in October, and it's a mobile app. It is a backstabbing game. It's I guess I can show the trailer. It's a multiplayer game where you have to get to the end. You have to go through a dungeon, a number of encounters, and in that number of encounters. Oh, gee, look, I own the domain. Okay. In the number of encounters, you get prestige points for each encounter that you kill. Well, that's good. The problem is you're fighting the other people, so you have to work together until you get to the end, and then you have to try to kill all your friends to get the most prestige. So, I have no idea how loud this is going to be, so hold on. I guess not very loud at all. Hold on. It's like Pokemon. Who's like Pokemon? There we go. So yeah, Cutthroat Caverns is a backstabbing game, and one of the cool things about it was, so I got the license, and it's fun, and I got to build it. I like taking existing games and porting them over to a digital form. But yeah, I'm very proud of Cutthroat Caverns. It's a very good game. So.
Okay, last question then comes from YouTube. Somebody, I never heard of him, Ron Jones, the artist.
He is an awesome, awesome guy. He is my other brother. Yes.
His question is, what music controller plugins would you recommend?
Ooh. You know, Karen, there's another plugin. Master Audio is what I normally use. I pulled it up real quick. You want something with ducking. It's by Dark something. Let's see, Master Audio. Dark Tonic, that's it. I bought this in 2013. Good God. Oh yeah, and
But they updated it January 23rd, 2020.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I look forward to. In my capacity, I get a lot of people who have established games from very old versions of Unity. Hang on, there we go. Who have very old versions of Unity, like versions 3, 4, and 5. And they go, hey, James, I got this application. I was like, okay, I want to convert it, put it on the iOS. Oh, okay. It was built in Unity3. Okay, and so much has changed in Unity, the particle engines, and they don't have particle emitters anymore. It's all this stuff, like what I'm doing with David Fox. It was built in Unity 4, and I'm putting it into VR. I'm like, oh God. So it's a little challenging, but it's a lot of fun because that's what I like doing. But yeah, I would say Master Audio is my hands down one that I use a lot.
Ron Jones, the artist, says thanks, and so do all of us here.
Yes, it's a really good plugin. Tip your waitress.